Begin the current Daf Mesechtes Nedarim Daf Tez Zayin. Begin on the bottom of his Tez Vav Mabeis, 3 lines up at the bottom of the Yamid, where we continue the halacha, the next Mishnah, which is contrasting these two big topics called Nedarim and Shavuos, which in the previous Mishnah we spoke about taking a kainim, a neder, that I'm going to sleep, that if I'm going to speak, that I'm going to walk. So our Mishnah then contrasts that with Shvua, and then it says another category that's going to contrast with Shvua, which follows into the next Mishnah, and then to the Mishnah after that. Again, contrasting these two oaths and vows, these two sugyas of your words making a prohibition. Again, classic, one's the gava, one's the chavtza, the Shvua is in the person, and the neder is in the object. I'm sure it's corresponds because in the Cheskel turned to the Chaim Peshim is joining me today's day and who helped out with all the technical assistance. Somebody's going to discuss about in today's daf are chaymer b'shvuos nedarim, the stringencies that oaths have over vows. A shvua is chal al davar she'ein b'mamish. It takes effect on somebody that doesn't have any substance, like sleep, because again, an oath is not on the object; it's on the person. So it could even be somebody that doesn't have any substance. Whereas nedarim does not take effect; only when somebody has substance. Also, differences, as we'll see, it's technical, but we'll see that the Mishnah will have a whole list. That by Shvua, if you say lo yoichalach or hashvua shoichalach or lo shvua loichalach, that's going to take effect. Whereas by Nedarim, and that's the stringency of Nedarim, you'll say carbon lo yoichalach, ha carbon shoichalach, lo carbon lo yoichalach, the same wording, just the Nedarim wording will not take effect, and we'll see exactly why that would be. Whereas then the Mishnah later, but the Mishnah also says chaym Nedarim and b'shvuas, that there's certain stringency that Nedarim have over shvuas. Then Nedarim would take effect to mevatel a mitzvah. Whereas the shvua does not take effect to be mevatel a mitzvah. So begin the current daf tezvav beis, 3 lines up in the bottom of the yamid. Says the Mishnah, we had said in the previous Mishnah regarding the Nedarim, like we said, that if someone says kainim, that if I'm going to sleep or I'm going to speak, we said the words were hariza b'liyachal devarai, and we already pointed out from the Ran along the continuum of the Gemara that that's a lesser terminology than that of the Mishnah's wording regarding Shavuos. And that's what our Mishnah is going to sum up later on, that these were stringencies that Shavuos have over Nedarim, which is, by Shavuot, if you take an oath, she'eni yashin, that I'm not going to sleep, she'eni medar, I'm not going to speak, she'eni malach, I'm not going to walk, they're usher, there it's going to be biblically prohibited as a oath, in contrast by Nedarim, when we said, b'layachal devarai, we said, let's say, especially according to Ravina, that that's only going to be rabbinically prohibited, it's not going to be a biblical neder. So that's a stringency because again the shvua takes effect on somebody that doesn't have mamash, doesn't have substance, in contrast to a neder. Now we continue going back to neder and then back to shvuas to show again a stringency that shvuas over neder, which is the next category. Let's say, and again this is technical, so you want to pay attention. Carbon loy oichalach. Let's say the wording was carbon, which is always the hatvasa that you're transferring from the sanctity of a carbon that I'm not going to eat from you. Now, what does this mean? So this is the round on the top of Tezayin Amud Aleph. He says, if you're going to say that by the life of the carbon I'm swearing, that's going to be permitted. Because a carbon is not something that you take an oath in. If you're saying that it should be a carbon, what I'm not going to eat from you, because it's saying carbon lo yochalach, let it be a carbon what I'm not going to eat from you. Well, therefore that's also permitted because he's only making an isser of a carbon on what he's not going to eat from the guy, not what he is going to eat from the guy. So therefore saying carbon lo yochalach, either it means b'chaya carbon mishtabeya, which is obviously not a shvua, we can't swear by the life of a carbon, and it's only saying that it's going to be a carbon what I'm not going to eat from you. So this wording of carbon halay eichalach regarding a neder is case number 1 that will not be a valid neder in the case of Nedarim. Case number 2. Let's say he says ha carbon she'eichalach. Here also says the Ran is going to be permitted because ha or hey aleph sounds like by the life of the carbon, because a person generally would take such an oath, but he hasn't said anything because that's not a valid neder because he's swearing by the life of a carbon. Lo carbon lo eichalach, different girsayis here, but we have it with a lamed aleph. Lo carbon lo eichalach, that's also going to be mutter. Why is that permitted? Because it sounds like, okay, it's not going to be a carbon. The Ran has the girsa that it was la carbon. But either way, la carbon is with a patach is the same thing as loy carbon. But what is it saying? It's saying, oh, what I'm not going to eat from you is not going to be a carbon. Oh, but the inference is, what I am going to eat from you is a carbon? Yeah, but the mission is like Remeir, who we already established on the previous Daf. Remeir does not hold of mechlal lavat shmeihan. You cannot say, oh, from the inference that this must be that, and saying that what I'm not eating from you is not a carbon, I would have to infer that what I am eating from you is a carbon. We don't say that. So these are three cases, that statements that are not effective in the category of Nedarim, which again the next mission is going to show. But regarding Shavuos, it is going to take effect. But first the Gemara explains the Getin type of design with Aleph. It says, yeah, Shavuos and Yashin is a Shavuos. Yeah, we're contrasting Nedarim and Shavuos in these Mishnayos. So the previous Mishnah spoke about Nedarim, that it's not really effective. We called it Hariza Balayachal Devar, which we had two interpretations. What does that mean? But Shavuot is Asr, yeah, it takes effect. Now the Gemara asks, Mani Masni'in. Wait, who is the Tana of our Mishnah? That what? That carbon is a terminology of neder, but if you say ha-carbon, for example, like in the Mishnah we just brought, that's not going to take effect. That's Remeir, that we brought on Daf Yomi at Aleph. Why? Because the Rabbi Yehuda, lo yishana le carbon, lo yishana le ha-carbon. He doesn't differentiate carbon, ha-carbon. He always needs a kuf hadimyan. If you recall, we had said, if you say Yerushalayim, you didn't say anything because you have to say ki Yerushalayim. You always have to say ki. You have to say like. So obviously our mission is like Remeir. And he's the one who's saying, no, carbon is Lashon Shvuah, but when you say ha-carbon, then it's not going to work because then you're swearing by the life of the carbon. And not like Rabbi Yehuda would hold anyways, all these terminologies are not good. But then says the Gemara, wait, aim a seifa, look at the seifa. One of the cases in the Mishnah was, if a guy says, la carbon, loy oichalach, or loy carbon, however you want to, whatever the girsa is, but we said that that's going to be mutter, that's going to be permitted. But I asked the Gemara, but Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, on Daf Gimel Amud Aleph, that said exactly this case of la carbon loy oichalach. And what did we say? Remeir oiser. How could Remeir say it's us? What does that mean? La carbon loy oichalach. It's saying what I'm not going to eat from you is, in other words, la carbon loy oichalach. How according to Remeir is it going to be forbidden? So Rabbi says, because you know why? Meaning, because we had said la carbon means loy carbon loy oichalach. So it's what I'm not going to eat from you is not going to be a carbon. So that sounds like what I am going to eat from you is going to be a carbon. So, but Remeir doesn't hold the mechlal avat shmeihan. So he said that we said that according to Meir, it's like you're saying a comma. La carbon means it should be a carbon. Therefore I cannot eat from you. So if that's the case, how could the last case of our Mishnah, again, we read it like it had a law already, but like the Ran had the girsa, and like obviously the Havamina of the Gemara has it, is that the last of the three cases, this was la carbon la ichalach. That exact wording we have on the Mishnah, Daf Yud Gimel, that your mayor said that it's going to be aser, not mutter. Why? So Rabbi explained, because you don't read it la carbon, loy carbon la ichalach, that what I'm not going to eat from you is not going to be a carbon, which means what I am going to eat from you is going to be a carbon, because Remeir doesn't hold machlav with the shmeihan. No, we read it like a comma, la carbon, it's going to be a carbon, and therefore la ichalach. So that's the exact case where here we're saying it's mutter. Says the Gemara, lekash, not difficult, as we see that the girsa is different. The Mishnah of Yud Gimel is the Amar la carbon. You said with a patach la carbon, there it's going to be aser because that's what we're reading it la carbon, comma, therefore la eichalach. But over here is the Amar loy la carbon, which is how we're reading all along. That's going to be mutter because the loy have a carbon comma. He's saying that what I'm not going to eat from you is not going to be a carbon, which sounds like, but what I am going to eat from you is a carbon. Wait a second, that's machlal avat shmeihan. Meir does not hold of machlal avat shmeihan, and therefore this case of loy la carbon or loy carbon, again, whatever the exact girsa is, but that you can't read anymore with a comma. Loy carbon, it's not going to be a carbon, therefore la eichalach, because that's not a carbon. That would be la carbon, not loy la carbon. So therefore, again, it's a different girsa. Basically, the Gemara is answering, and therefore there's a loy instead of la, and therefore la, although we could read as loy, but we could also read as not loy. We could read as la carbon, comma, so lo echalach. Here, where it's not just la carbon, it's loy carbon. There's no way of reading it like Rababa with a comma, and therefore that's why it's going to be mutter, according to Rameir. Now we get to the halacha of the next Mishnah, which is contrasting with the previous Mishnah. We just said these three cases as categorically going to be mutter by Nedarim. Now we're going to show you that it's a chumrah by Shavuos, that all these three cases, again, for really technical reasons, are all going to be aser. What are these three cases? Let's say a guy says, Shavua, I swear, lo eichelach. So these are the exact same three cases we spoke about by carbon, which is Nedarim, but we said it's mutter. Here we're going to say it's aser. So case number one sounds like you're swearing that you're not going to eat. Shavua lo eichelach. I swear I'm not going to eat from you. That's obviously would be an iser. Case number two, ha shavua sheichelach. Now, by neder, we didn't like it because we said it like you're swearing by the life of the carbon. The whole carbon, that's not a valid neder. You have to swear in the name of Hashem or whatever it's not. But here, like the Ran explains, you cannot explain the wording of hashvua that you're swearing by the life of an oath, like we said by the life of a carbon, because people don't speak it like that. You won't swear by the life of a shvua. What does that mean? You could understand swearing by the life of a carbon. It's a living creature. You don't swear by the life of a shvua. So that's also going to be just like hashvua. Behold, I'm taking the oath. Shoichelach, if I'm going to eat from you. And the last case was lo shvua loy oichelach, which the Ran wants to say, forget about even if you say lo with a lamed aleph, but even if you say with a lamed that has a patach, la shvua, it's going to be aser. Because even though a lamed with a pasach means loy, which actually is the girsa we have anyways, but the Mishnah is like Rameir, who doesn't hold a machlala tishmei hen. So the question the Ran's addressing is that, so why by shvua is it going to be aser? You're saying loy shvua. So it's not an oath of lo yechalech, what I'm not going to eat from you. Oh, the inference is, oh, but what I am going to eat from you is going to be a shvua. But I just thought you told me in the previous mission it's going like Rameir. Rameir doesn't hold up mechalava tishmei hen. Why would this case be aser? So the Ran explains that the reason is because the Gemara concludes in Shavuos Vav Med Aleph that when does Rameir not hold mechalava tishmei hen, that he doesn't infer your statements? That's only by mammon, by monetary law, or even by prohibitory law that has a monetary application. But something that's just absolutely prohibitory law, he would hold of mechalava tishmei hen. So therefore, by Nedarim, which we spoke about in the previous Mishnah, Nedarim is an iser that has mammon to it. Why? What does that mean? Because you cannot have a neder without a chefta, without an object, because they don't take effect until they don't have substance. So therefore there's a monetary element because there's an object here that becomes prohibited. But a shvua is just an isser, which takes effect in the person's body. So since it's just a absolute isser, even Rameh would agree that we would say machalava teshemei hen, and therefore even by this third category, this third case, you would hold that it's going to be usser, because then you are going to say machalav at teshemei hen because it's isser. Now the Gemara has a technical question on the Mishnah. Okay, great. You compared the case of Nedarim and Shavuos. You told me by Shavuos it's going to be usser, Ned is going to be mutter. But my question is like this, says the Gemara. The middle case you spoke about, you said, ha shavua sha'oichelach, you said it's going to be usser. And we were focusing on the word ha. The word ha, by neder, we said means by the life of a carbon, that you don't swear by the life of a carbon, it's not a valid neder. Shvua, it can't mean you're swearing by the life of the oath. So okay, it's like just saying basically shvua, that if I'm going to eat from you, and then it's going to be usser. The problem, says the Gemara Machlal, the inference is, the ha shvua sha'oichelach, the way you make it sound like in the Mishnah, is that by saying ha shvua, this shvua, if I'm going to eat from you, that you're telling me what is usser, meaning it sounds like you're telling me that by swearing ha shvua sha'oichelach, is he swearing that he's not going to eat from the guy, even though he's saying sha'oichelach. He's like, means an oath of what I'm going to eat from you, meaning that I'm not going to eat from you. Problem is, it seems to be contradicted by Mishnah Masechta Shavuos. Mishnah there says, Shavuos shtayim. There are two oaths of what's called the Shavuos Bitoy, that the Torah obligates if you violate this oath of enunciations, a carbon oil b'yard, again, depending how much money you have. The pasuk says, Nefesh kisi shava lebatis fasayim. If a person's going to take an oath to enunciate with his lips, there's two types of Shavuos that are mentioned in the pasuk explicitly. It says, lahara or lahetiv. He's going to do good or do bad, which is regarding the future, if I'm going to eat or not eat. Now, from a rebbe, the pasuk which says, l'cholash yevati adam, whatever the person is going to enunciate, the Gemara in Shavuos Daf Chavav Manaf includes another two for the past. If a guy swears, I ate or I didn't eat, and if he's lying. So it's not a shvur shav. It's not one of these other types of shvuas. It's a shvuas bita. As the Mishnah explained, shein arba, there's two oaths that the Torah talks about, which are really four. The Torah mentions shelo eichel v'shelo eichel. If I'm going to eat or if I'm not going to eat, and you do or you don't, if you violate what you swore about, then you have to bring a carbon b'yard. Then we include another two, which is shein arba, shechalti v'shelo eichalti. If a guy swears I ate or I didn't eat, turns out he was lying, then he would have to bring the carbon b'yard. That's what the Mishnah says, but the Gemara wants to just bring out a technical point from that Mishnah. Medikama from the fact that the Mishnah says, if I'm sha'oichel or v'shaloi oichel, she'achalti v'shaloi achalti, mechlal, the inference is, the sha'oichelach, if you're saying I'm going to eat from you, the inference is, da'achil namashma, it sounds like I'm going to eat from you, because the Mishnah picks both sides of the wording. Eating, not eating, eaten, not having eaten. So it sounds like the words sha'oichel means that I'm gonna eat. So how in our Mishnah, again, it's a technical point, how are you telling me hashvu sha'oichelach means that you're usher to eat from the guy, but sha'oichelach sounds like that you will eat. Why are you becoming usher? So Abaye says, no, sha'oichel shtei l'shaynis mashma. The word that I will eat tolerates two translations. What does it mean? It depends on the context. Let's say they were pushing him to eat. And he was saying, achilna, achilna. I'm going to eat. You know what? Now you take an oath, I'm going to eat. Obviously, that's achilna mashma. Obviously, it means that he's going to eat. Come on, do it. You can do it, yeah. You know, we want you to eat. And he's like, I'll eat. And you know, I swear the achilna that I'll eat. That's what he's saying. He's swearing that he's going to eat. Aval Omar, but if he says, Lo yachilna, no, I'm not eating. Lo yachilna, I'm not eating. V'suam, and then he says, Shvua sha'oichel, I take an oath that I'm going to eat. It doesn't mean I'm going to eat, obviously. What's the context? The guy's saying he's being stubborn. He's saying I'm not, and then he takes an oath. Obviously, the Lo yachilna karma is saying that I'm not going to eat, and that's the case of our Mishnah. And our Mishnah was talking about where they were pushing him to eat, and he says, Hashvu sha'oichelach, I take an oath. I know if they're backing down already. But what does it mean when he says sha'oichel? It doesn't mean I'm going to eat. Obviously, the context is telling us he's saying I'm not going to eat, and therefore it's not a contradiction. That's one approach. Another approach says the Gemara Rav Ashi, he says, no, he says it's a girsa. Sha'oichel d'shvu, when we said this case of oath of eating, she'i oichel kamar. Meaning, when the Mishnah said, ha shvu sha'oichel, the right girsa should be she'i oichel, that I will not eat. And that's why it's going to be asur, because the person's saying, I will not eat. So the Gemara says, come on. If that's the case, pshita, obviously, if you said oichel means not eating, of course it can be asur. Remember, what would be the chiddush of this case? Says the Gemara, what would you say? Make him lishnehu, or like the Ran has a girsa, me'akim lishne, which is from the terminology of twisted, of distorted. In other words, maybe he was lengthy with the aleph. And it seems like he's saying, she'i oichel. And I would have entertained to say this, that really it's she'oichel, because people don't usually talk she'i oichel. They say shaloi oichel. She'i oichel is not your regular wording. So maybe you would say that his words got distorted. The it gilei, meaning he said she'i oichel, and I would say maybe he really means to say she'oichel. It's just that when he was speaking, he elongated the aleph, and it sounded like she'i oichel, but really he said she'i oichel. I wanted to say oichel. That's the chiddush. They were saying that if you said she'i oichel, even though maybe it's not the wording people usually use, and maybe you were just like trying to say the word oichel and you stressed it and you went with a chidik and you went like she'i oichel. That no, we're going to consider that as a shvua. Those are two different interpretations how to understand the halacha of the Mishnah. I'm going to contrast these two interpretations. Abaye lo ama tam Ravashi. Abaye, who gave the first interpretation, did not say like Rav Ashi, who is changing the word sha'oichel into she'i oichel, because the like the Tana she'oichel. That's not our girsa. We don't have that she'i oichel. Now, but Rav Ashi, not de min tam da Abaye. Rav Ashi, however, he removed himself from the reasoning and the rationale of Abaye that sha'oichel could mean both eating and not eating, depending on the context. Because Ksavar, he held, if that's the case, then shaloi oichel nami mashma shtei l'shaynos. Then not eating could also mean depending on the context. Why? Let's say let's say they're pushing him to eat. Varman, he says, what? Lo yachilna? Lo yachilna, meaning like in this like rhetorical, like, what, you think I'm not going to eat? I'm not going to eat? And he says, I'll swear. So, bein she'oichel, bein she'loy oichel, whether he says, I swear that I'll eat, or I swear I won't eat, hadin achilna mashma the amar, so this wording of that he's saying that I'm going to eat, so meaning to fulfill his words that he said, well, I'm not going to eat. Again, there's many different girsayos how to translate this Gemara. This is just one of the many ways. Like he's saying that, you think I'm not going to eat? I'm not going to eat? I said, I swear that I'm going to eat or not eat. Whatever you're going to say, you're going to tell me based on the context. That means that he's swearing that he's going to eat. Now, so if you could also say the wording, that I swear I'm not going to eat, that I'm not going to eat. Again, it's not clear exactly what the Gemara means to say over here, but basically he's trying to say that how do you ever know what a guy is saying? You could always translate, or the guy should have said that I'm not going to eat. What's he saying that I am going to eat? Or so Elatana Pascha, rather the way Rav Ashi says is that no, the Tana was clear. She'oichel, if I'm going to eat, the chilna mash means I'm going to eat. She'oichel, I'm not going to eat means loichel mash, I'm not going to eat. Basically, it's not. You could tolerate then everything, meaning anything, and it's not clear, and therefore he doesn't want to say with a biased interpretation that hashvur she'oichelach means that depending on the context, because then it says loyachel could also mean depending on the context, and what would that mean? So therefore, he doesn't like that interpretation. He says better have the girsa she'oichelach than just saying she'oichelach, because then everything can mean anything, and then nothing means anything. Yeah. It's what? Yes, exactly. Because we see that the word sha'oichel means that I will eat, and how could our Mishnah say that you're going to be aser? By saying this is no. The guy said she'oichelach, and therefore you're going to be aser. And maybe you would have said that he really meant to say sha'oichel, and he shouldn't be aser because people don't usually word. No, Kamash more on that. No, he said she'oichelach. Now the next Mishnah continues on this theme, really finishing off the previous Mishnayos, that zechoyme b'shvus mimidarm. This, the past Mishnayos, stringency of oaths versus vows, because we had said the cases of shvur shaloichel, all those cases of la shvur shaichelach, hashvur shaichelach, we said by shvur is going to be aser. By nadam we said carbon shaichelach, loy carbon shaichelach, those said we said mutter. So this is the stringency that shvur has over nadam, and also the case of shvur she'eni yashin, which actually the Gemara is going to explain which one are we talking about zechayim b'shvus nadam. Regarding saying if I take an oath or a vow regarding sleep or speech, regarding the Nadarim, we said that that's really mutter, and we said harizah b'leichel davar, question is rabbinically, whatever. But regarding shvuas, that's going to be a bona fide issue because shvuas takes effect on the nadavar she'in be'mamish, like sleeping and speaking. So this is the stringency that we have by shvuas over nadarim. Now, however, says the Mishnah, the other way is also true. B'chayim b'nadarim and the shvuas, we have a stringency that nadarim have over shvuas. Kate's at household. So if someone says koinim sukkah shani yoseh, there's an isser of a neder of a sukkah that I'm going to make. Or lulav shani naitel, I'm going to take and shackle the lulav. Or tefillin shamaniach, I'm taking a neder on tefillin that I'm never going to put on. So by nedar maser, by nedarim actually, it's going to be an isser of neder that's going to take effect. B'shvu is mutter, but by oaths, it's going to be permitted. Why? Sheinish boin laver ala mitzvahs, because you cannot swear to violate the mitzvahs, as explained in the Gemara, why by neder would it take effect, and b'shvu not. But first, the Gemara explains regarding the terminology of the Mishnah. We said in the Mishnah, chaymer. We said that there's a stringency that we have of shvuas over nadarim and nadarim over shvuas. So says the Gemara, the word chaymer, that you're saying shvua is more chamer than neder, machlal the nederhu. So the inference is that it's the case that you describe by neder would be iser. It's just not as chamer as shvua. Problem is, but mutter gritani, the Mishnah Daf Tezvavim Abei said all those carbon loyachlach, ha carbon loyach, we said it's going to be mutter. So why are you saying now in the concluding Mishnah that this is a chumrah that shvuas has over nadarim? What chaymer? Chaymer sounds like it's just more stringent than nadarim, as if nadarim is also asa, but nadarim is totally mutter. So how are you saying in terminology of chaymer? Says the Gemara, no, that's a seifa the idach bava ketani. It's at the seifa of the prior category of the previous Mishnah. So there was two things we spoke about. We had spoken about that of the carbon sha'ichalach and ha-carbon, that which were really technical points, each one of them. But it's not going in that Mishnah. It's going in the previous Mishnah. You said shvuah she'eni yashan. I swear I'm not going to sleep. She'eni medaber. I'm not going to speak she'eni malach. I'm not going to go there. Aser ve'chaymer b'shvuas nedarim. That is what we're saying is more stringent. Shvuas over nedarim. And as the Ran explains, here it's appropriate to say chaymer of shvuas over nedarim because by nedarim it is at least rabbinically forbidden, which the Ram points out is going like Ravina, who he explained. Although the Mishnah actually said, if you say koinim she'eni yashan, koinim shan medaber. We actually said in the Mishnah, Hariza b'lo yachal devarai, the Ravina had explained that's only rabbinically, because biblically it cannot take effect, because it's not something that has mamish, there's no substance, there's no object for it to take effect on. It's just a shvu is more chamer than neder, because by shvu it's going to be biblically, and by neder it's going to be only rabbinically. Now, the Ran explains that the Gemara is saying this answer according to Ravina, because that is the truth that we hold like Ravina, that the halacha of the Mishnah that says bal yachal was only rabbinically. And the Ran just asks, he says, why don't we make the dig the other way also on the halacha that our Mishnah said of chayma ben nedarim b'shvuos, which is that neder takes effect on dvar mitzvah and shvuah not, because a shvuah actually it would be by dvar mitzvah, and you would get malchus for shvuah shav. It's just not taking effect to nullify the mitzvah. By nedarim you can't do the mitzvah, but you can't shackle the lulav because there's isra of neder. Because the Rishonim explain that why wouldn't you say asay doicha loisa say? Why don't you say the mitzvah of shakal and lulav? Saying the sukkah mitzvah say is doicha loisa say with the neder. So the Rashba explains because actually a neder has an asay and a loisa say. So the neder actually will get in the way of performing the mitzvah. The shvuah, yes, you're going to get a malchus, but it's not going to stop you from doing the mitzvah. You have to go ahead and perform the mitzvah. That's the difference between them. But yes, it would be chaymer of nedarim of shvuas, because actually by shvuas it would take effect. It just wouldn't be as stringent as a neder that you wouldn't be able to do the mitzvah. It has all the words that you say that you should do. We have the wording is kachala yitzim epiv yaseh. That's a mitzvah say. And you have lo yachal devarei, which is also the lab. So that's why it takes effect. So the Gemara goes on to explain the Mishnah. We said chayma ben nedarim b'shvuas. We said okay, there's also stringency that nedarim have over shvuas. Ketzar v'chulu. So we explain all these dvar mitzvahs that by nedarim it's going to be asur. By shvuah it's going to be mutter, at least to the fact that you're going to have to still do the mitzvah. So the Gemara tells us Rav Kahana Masni, he taught that Omar Begidl Amar Rav. However, Rav Yomi Masni, he taught it there was actually Omar Begidl Amar Shmuel. So Machlekes was the name of Rav, was the name of Shmuel, but they explained this halacha of the Mishnah. Minayin she'ein nishboin lavral mitzvahs. How do you know that you don't take a shvuah to violate the mitzvahs? That meaning that you're going to still have to do the mitzvah. It says in the pasuk Midbar, it says lo yachal devarai. He should not profane his words, which teaches us that devarai lo yachal, his own words he should not profane. But he should profane it if it's lecheftzei shemayim, meaning if his shvuah is nullifying what God wants, cheftzei shemayim, not only his own words, then actually yes, profane your words and don't do like you said and do the mitzvah. That's the source that we know that you cannot take a shvuah to violate a mitzvah. Says the Gemara, wait a second. Ma'ishno neder, why is the vow any different? Because the Chsibit says in the pasuk, in that same pasuk by Midbar over there, it says, Ish ki yader, if a man's going to take a neder la Hashem, meaning even if it's a neder that affects Hashem, the pasuk says, lo yachel devarai, don't profane his words, meaning even if his neder has a bitl of mitzvahs Hashem, don't profane it. He has to keep his neder. Well, shvuah nami haksev. Shvuah is written in that same pasuk. It says, ohi shava shvuah, or if he takes an oath, Lashem lo yachel devarai. So Lashem is also going on, he shava shvuah. So what's the difference between neder and shvuah? That it does take effect even if it's violating God's desire. So Abaya says, no, logic would tell us that the word Lashem is not going on shvuah, it's only going on kiyader neder. Why? Because and this is the fundamental principle, again, the lumdus we say throughout this Masechta. A neder makes sense that it'll take effect on a devar mitzvah because he's prohibiting on himself the pleasure of the sukkah, which that's the terminology, the wording, the mechanisms of how a neder works. Because the Amar Hana sukkah lai, He's saying the pleasure of the sukkah is on me. Now, you cannot feed a person something that's forbidden to him, like we said on the prior daf. And therefore, okay, there's a neder, he can't do this mitzvah, he can't take this lulav. But when you're saying the wording of a shvuah, the amar, where the person says shvuah shlo yehenem min hasukkah, he says, I swear I'm not going to have pleasure from the sukkah. You cannot remove yourself in the midst of sukkah which you're commanded in. There's no isser on the chavtza, that there's no isser on the, you're saying you're not going to do something. Who are you to say you're not going to do something? Go ahead. The Torah says you have to do it. A neder is different because this object is now prohibited as a neder from him. So therefore he can't go ahead and do the mitzvah right now. That's the difference between neder and shvuah, because one's on the chavtza, one's on the gabra. Now, yeah. Oh, the question is, what is he saying? Is he saying, you want to know, it's a good point. When the guy's saying, he's swearing about the, it's a good shayla. Well, it could be many sukkahs. Well, Esther could be one Esther, or many Esther. Sukkah could be one sukkah or many sukkahs. Did he mean this Esther, this sukkah? Or did he mean any Esther, any sukkah? It's a good question. It sounds like it's talking about this one. How do you make it on? What? Yeah, you could say any Esther. I mean, yeah, whatever it is has a double shabbat. Yeah, it's an object that would be. Yeah, it's just a good question. What are we talking about? He's talking about in general. Any esrog, any tefillin, any sukkah, or is he talking about this one? Does it make a difference? Which one? Why? No, maybe this is the only esrog that he had. We're saying this esrog he wouldn't be able to utilize. But if you swear you're not taking this esrog, it's not true. You have to. You want to know in that situation, would we tell you to do any other one? I don't know, chayr or not. You would do it with this one anyway, because you can't be nishbon levat less a mitzvah. So unless saying that's not bittul mitzvah, you could use another esrog. That's an interesting discussion. Now, Amar Rava just wants to make a comment. He says, what do you think? Mitzvahs are did they had anah, meaning the Ran explains, Rava's question is not going on the explanation of Abaya. He holds of Abaya's answer to differentiate by Dvar Mitzvah. His problem is the wording of Abaya. Abaya's wording was, Hada Ama Hana Sukkah Alai, and Hada Ama Shvu Shlehenim in Sukkah. That wording he has a problem with. If you say the wording of Abaya of Hanas Sukkah Alai, it's not true. You actually would sit in the Sukkah of the mitzvah of Sukkahs, because mitzvahs are not lehanais. That wouldn't be Isra of the Neder. If your wording was Hana Sukkah Alai, actually you would be, even by Neder, allowed to sit in the Sukkah, because that's not Hana. That is mitzvah. So rather, Elam Araba, he just wants to change the wording. He's like, Abay, you got it? Just one step off. A little bit better. Hadama Yeshiva Sukkah Salai. Not Hana Sukkah Alai. He says, the sitting in the Sukkah is forbidden on me. But Hadama Shvu Shleish Sukkah, and by the oath he says, I swear I'm not going to sit in the Sukkah. That makes sense. Because sitting is something that is the mitzvah, and that you can't do. Now, the Ran does discuss, and he says that he has the following question. When the guy says Yeshiva Sukkah Alai, the sitting of the Sukkah is forbidden on me, what's going on? It's still something that has no substance, because you're going the Yeshiva Sukkah Alai. The sitting is not as something that you can physically delineate. It's a sitting. So he says, you're right. You have to say we're talking about where he says, and this is by the first wide lines of the Ran, where he says, Koinim sukkah li shivasa yalai. I take a neder that the sukkah, the object, its sitting is forbidden on me. Which Rabbi just didn't bother to explain. He just was coming to contrast Abai, who said Hana. He was saying, no, Abai, you can't say no, you got to say sitting, but you're right, it's got to be sukkah li shivasa. That's how the Ran says. But he brings some taisvis that actually they say that no, even if a person says Kainim Yeshiva Sukkah Alai, it would be effective, and it's not considered something that doesn't have substance, only when you don't mention the name of an object that you're being prohibited on. For example, if you say Shani Yashin, that I'm going to sleep, I'm going to speak. When you mention the prohibited object, that is something that has substance, and even though you don't say Kainim Sukkah Alai, you don't say Kainim Sukkah li Shivasa Alai, you say Kainim Yeshiva Sukkah Alai. Once you mention the object in the sentence, it's going to be a valid neder. Now, based on this, that what the Gemara says in Ksubas Daf Nun Tes or in our Masechta Daf Pei Beis, but when the person is makdish ma'aseh de ishtay, he sanctifies his wife's earnings, which also doesn't have any substance. So the Gemara tells us, it's where he says yikatru yodei lo yisayin. You have to sanctify the hands for the ones who's making the earnings. So it says the Ran, according to Taisus, it doesn't mean that he actually says this. It's like he says this. Because since he's mentioning the ma'aseh yadayim, that's sufficient because you mentioned a davar shish b'mamash, even though it wasn't really saying that. It was saying on the earnings of the hands. Now, but then the Ran has another question. He says, wait a second. Even if you're saying yeshiva sukkah lai, not hana, let's say the sitting in the sukkah is forbidden on me. Why you forbidden to sit in the sukkah to perform the mitzvah? But since you're telling me mitzvahs Allah lahanas, they're not there for pleasure, so he's not having any benefit from the sukkah at all. So what's the problem with yeshiva sukkah? Okay, you change it Rava from hana to yeshiva. So you're not allowed to sit in there. I'm not sitting in there. I'm not getting any benefit. That's not sitting. I'm just doing a mitzvah. So Taisus answer says, no, but you said the sitting is forbidden on you. Even though you don't have any benefit, it's still going to take effect. No, that's not considered a benefit. That's not considered a benefit. That's a mitzvah. That's not hana. That's not hana. The concept of mitzvah level hana is then the mitzvah say whatever that means. Is it a spiritual, physical? No, it's not considered having benefit. Chtiyah mitzvah. But yeshiva, you're saying you right. No, for which case? Which case? Right. If let's say you said hana sukkah, the problem would be having hana. I'm doing a mitzvah, I'm not having hana. Which hana? Of the mitzvah, that's what the Gemara is saying. That no, that's not considered having hana. The mitzvah is not considered hana. I'm just doing what the Odin told me to do. It's not considered hana. Right, so we spoke about that exactly. That would be different because you could go in the mikveh in the winter with the az, but not in the summertime when you're having that's because that's also there. That's not just the mitzvah. That's a secondary, but not the mitzvah. There's the mitzvah and then there's the other. Which one, the hana case or the yeshiva? Yes, so that's what the Ran's explaining now. He's saying that yeshiva is even, if you're saying it's only the hana of the sitting, if you would be in the summer month, you're right. It would be that other problem of having the pleasure. But we're saying, let's say it's just for the mitzvah of itself. So if you said hana, so then I'm not having hana. But if you say yeshiva sukkah, then you're right. You're not having hana because you're just doing the mitzvah. Even so, you cannot sit in the sukkah. Nothing to do with hana. It doesn't have to be just hana. It's just whatever the words you said. And therefore he says, let's say a guy says, I take a neder that I'm not throwing any more pebbles into the water. It brings me back all my young years when I used to throw with my friends into the river. I'm not doing this anymore. Makes me too sad. So he's going to be forbidden, even though he doesn't have any pleasure from throwing in the rocks. You're not allowed to throw in the rocks because those are the words that you said. So same thing is also, you said you're not going to sit, you're not sit, even though you're not going to have any hana. Now, however, that's specifically if the guy mentions the sitting in the sukkah or the throwing of the pebbles. But if he says, Kainim sukkah alai, I take a neder that sukkah is forbidden on me, or Kainim tzrarze alai, that this pebble is forbidden on me, then he could sit in the sukkah to perform the mitzvah. And he could throw the rock that's forbidden into the sea if he wants to, because we presume that he didn't make himself forbidden, only that of hana. Because when someone is makdish his behema, he makes it forbidden on him on everyone in the world, and even so you're not forbidden to touch the animal. Here also, that generally when the person just says a isser sukkah, isser tzrarze, he means that of eating or having pleasure of it. But when he specifies that he's making forbidden on himself something, even of touching or of throwing a pebble or of sitting, then it's going to take effect. So that's where the Rans come with his question, his answer. His question is like, okay, you said yeshiva sukkah, but isn't Nedarim only for something that you're getting in the hana? Yeah, generally, if you just say sukkah, you're right. You'd be able to sit into the sukkah because you're not getting hana because mitzvah lahanas nindu. But when you say you specify and you say yeshiva, you said sitting, you can't sit. I don't care you're not getting hana. You say you're not going to throw the pebbles, you can't throw the pebbles. But if you just said the isra of the pebbles on me and you're not getting any pleasure throwing the rocks, then you could throw in the rocks. So that's not considered having any hana from the thing. Now the Gemara ends off with one final point that The Gemara has a question. Okay, so you're telling me this contrast of our Mishnah, and you just brought me a source where it says La Hashem only by the neder part, but it's not going on the Hisha b'Shavua. Therefore, you could only make a neder on the Dvar Mitzvah, but not a Shavua. Says Gemara, this halacha that you cannot take an oath to violate mitzvahs. Mahacha nafkale is really learned from this pasuk that we just quoted from Layachal Devar, but mahasam nafkale we learn that from a different source. So we need two sources. The time like learn the brisa. You would think if you take a shvur to say, that's it, I'm not doing any more of this mitzvah, no more tefillin, I'm done with this, and he doesn't nullify it. You would think he's going to be liable for his oath. As we continue to talk about Yudzayin and Av Tamalama, that's a pasuk says to Yikra. No, the oath is lahara lahetiv. You can take a shvur to do good or to do bad. And what's it comparing to do good or to do bad? So mahatava, just like the doing good is rishus, is something that's voluntary. Meaning, if you want to eat something or don't want to eat something, then you can be chayv a carbon on that shvur if you don't fulfill it. Which, as the Rush brings the third parak of Masechta Shvuos, explains how do you know that it's only talking about doing good of rishus, not of a mitzvah. It's just something you want to choose to eat in this burger place or not. Afara rishus, so that's what the pasuk is comparing. Also, you're doing bad has to also only be something that's voluntary. Which that's coming to exclude if you swore that you're going to not do a mitzvah and you don't do it. You don't have that option. Your oath is not taking effect. It's only on something that's a devar rishus, not a devar mitzvah. So wait a second, we have another pasuk saying the same idea that you cannot be nishba lavat les a mitzvah. So what's the source? So the Gemara says you're right. You need both psukim. Chadkra, one pasuk, which is the pasuk of lahara lahetiv, the one we just brought right now, is lemifted in carbon shvua. Is to say that if he violates his oath, he's going to be exempt from a carbon of a shvua because that pasuk is by the carbon of shvua's bitui that generally you have to bring a carbon if you violate your oath. No, you don't have to bring no carbon. And the other pasuk of lo yachal devarai is lemiftidei min lav shvua, is exempting him not only from the carbon but even from the oath that you're not even violating the lav because you cannot make such an oath and therefore you're not going to get any violation if you don't fulfill your oath. You end up putting on tefillin because some guy stops you in Times Square and you do wrap yourself with tefillin. You swore you're not going to. You're not going to have a lav for that because that is not a lav. You cannot swear. That's learned out from the other pasuk. That's why we have to. Thank you for any time.